The car is not losing power, Daniel Brooks said quietly. It is losing permission. No one in the glass-walled service bay answered him. The hypercar sat beneath a row of cold white lights, its silver body reflecting every face gathered around it. Two senior technicians stood beside an open diagnostic cart. Marcus Bell, the lead technician at Crestmont Luxury Motors, stared at a tablet filled with fault codes. Across from him, Caroline Whitmore held a paper cup that had gone cold almost an hour earlier. In 48 hours, the car was supposed to appear at the launch of a medical research partnership carrying her company's name. At that moment, it could not move 6 inches. Preston Hale placed a leather folder on the counter between them. The central power distribution system is compromised, he said. The control modules are no longer communicating reliably. Replacing the affected components, recalibrating the system, and restoring factory certification will cost approximately $200,000. Caroline looked through the glass at the car. You are certain? We have run every approved test. Daniel stood near the rear service entrance holding a rebuilt alternator he had come to deliver. His 7-year-old daughter, Lily, waited beside him with a blue toy car in both hands. Her sitter had cancelled before sunrise, and Daniel had brought her along because there had been no one else to call. He wore a grey work shirt, faded jeans, and boots marked by years of shop floors. Nothing about him belonged in a room designed to make expensive problems look controlled. Preston noticed him watching. Delivery goes to receiving, he said. Daniel did not move. Marcus pressed the start command again. Somewhere beneath the rear bodywork, a relay clicked once, paused, then clicked a second time. The dashboard flashed, went dark, and returned with a line of warning symbols. Daniel listened without looking at the screen. Try it once more, he said. Preston gave a short laugh. This is not the kind of problem a roadside mechanic solves. Lily looked up at her father. Daniel did not defend himself. He only watched the left side of the dashboard as Marcus attempted another start. The same 2 clicks came back, separated by less than a second. One green indicator disappeared before the others. Daniel's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Caroline saw it. You know something? She asked. Preston answered before Daniel could. He heard a relay. We have 26 pages of diagnostics. Daniel set the alternator on the receiving counter. The codes are downstream, he said. Something smaller is interrupting the network before the modules finish checking each other. Marcus lowered the tablet. Based on what? Daniel glanced toward the floor near the left rear wheel. A small dark component rested beside the service lift, no larger than the end of his thumb. It carried a narrow metal band and a hairline crack across one edge. Daniel bent down and picked it up with a clean shop towel. Preston's face remained still, but his eyes moved to the part too quickly. Daniel noticed. Caroline noticed him noticing. Does that belong to my car? She asked. Preston stepped forward. Set it down. Daniel turned the piece once beneath the light. 7 years earlier, he had written a warning about this exact failure. No one had read it then. Now the same part was lying on the floor of a dealership preparing to charge Caroline $200,000. Daniel did not hand the component to Preston. He placed it on the clean towel beside the alternator and looked through the glass at the silent car. The crack along the edge was almost invisible unless the light struck it from the side. Lily stepped closer to the counter, still holding her blue toy car, but Daniel touched 2 fingers lightly to her shoulder and she stopped. Where did you find that? Marcus asked. Near the left rear wheel. Then it could have come from anything in this bay. Daniel looked at the metal band around the part. Not with that resistance marking. Preston closed the leather folder. You delivered the alternator. Your job here is finished. Daniel gave a small nod, but he did not leave. The shape of the part had brought back a room he had spent years trying not to think about. 7 years earlier, he had worked in a prototype diagnostics group for a performance car manufacturer outside Detroit. He was 27 then, newly married, sleeping 4 hours a night, and still convinced that good evidence would always matter if it was clear enough. During a winter test program, 3 prototype vehicles had produced the same impossible pattern, dozens of modules reporting failure at once, no consistent power loss, and a shutdown that appeared random until Daniel traced it to a network termination resistor that cost less than lunch. The part did not fail completely. It fractured under heat, opened for a fraction of a second, then reconnected before most diagnostic tools could record the interruption. The software blamed everything downstream. Daniel wrote a 42-page report recommending a design change and a service inspection campaign. The projected cost reached into the millions. 2 weeks later, the report disappeared from the internal system. His supervisor told him the issue could not be reproduced. Daniel showed him the damaged parts. The supervisor looked at the budget instead. The final rejection carried an executive signature Daniel never forgot. By then Emily had begun waking with pain she could not explain. Within months, hospital visits replaced test tracks, and Daniel stopped arguing with men who could delay a meeting more easily than he could delay his wife's treatment. He left the company, found contract work closer to home, and built his life around appointments, school pickups, and whatever hours remained after Lily fell asleep. Emily died 3 years later. Daniel kept the old report on an encrypted drive in a drawer he almost never opened. Now, under the spotless lights of Crestmont Luxury Motors, the same failure sat on a towel in front of him. Caroline watched his face. "You have seen this before," she said. "Yes. On this model?" "On the system this model was built from." Preston leaned against the counter with the patient expression of a man waiting for an inconvenience to end. "That is a serious claim." Daniel looked at him. "So is $200,000. Marcus stepped closer to the towel but did not touch the part. "A resistor that small cannot create this many faults. It can if the network needs it to know where the signal ends." Lily looked through the glass at the dashboard. "The green light on the left goes away first," she said. Everyone turned toward her. She pointed with the toy car. "It did it both times." Daniel glanced at Caroline. The child had noticed the same sequence his report described 7 years earlier. Caroline looked from Lily to the failed part, then toward the hypercar. For the first time that morning, the official diagnosis no longer seemed complete. Caroline did not change her mind immediately. She looked at the silent hypercar, then at Preston, then back at Daniel as though weighing risk against embarrassment. The launch was 48 hours away. Investors, medical researchers, and national press had already confirmed attendance. The car had been chosen because it represented precision, speed, and control. At that moment, it represented none of those things. "Explain why I should stop an approved repair process based on one damaged component found on the floor," she said. Daniel met her eyes without urgency. "You should not. You should stop because the symptoms do not match the diagnosis." Marcus folded his arms. "We replaced the auxiliary battery, verified the primary distribution block, and tested every control module on the approved sequence." "Individually," Daniel said. "Yes. But the car fails when they try to agree with each other." Preston let out a slow breath. "That is a convenient theory from someone who has not touched the vehicle." Daniel looked at the service tablet in Marcus's hand. "The first failure appears before the powertrain controller reports ready. The security gateway sees an incomplete network, so it blocks authorization. That is why the car has power but will not start." Marcus glanced down at the tablet, then quickly back up. Caroline noticed. "Is that possible?" she asked. Marcus hesitated. "Possible is not the same as proven." Preston stepped closer to Caroline, lowering his voice as though protecting her from a distraction. "Every hour we delay reduces the chance of meeting your deadline. We have the replacement modules available. My recommendation stands." Caroline looked at Daniel again. And yours? Do not replace anything yet. You are asking me to trust memory over certified diagnostics. I am asking you to test the cheapest explanation before approving the most expensive one. The room became quiet enough for the ventilation system to be heard above them. Lily stood beside the counter, rolling the blue toy car slowly between her palms. She was watching the dashboard through the glass. Caroline followed her gaze. You said the left green light turns off first. Lily nodded. It stays on longer when they wait before pressing the button. Marcus looked toward the car. Daniel did not smile, but something in his expression settled. The network is stabilizing when it is cold, he said. Then the fractured resistor heats, opens, and drops the signal. Preston shook his head. We are not turning a multimillion-dollar vehicle into a guessing exercise. You already did, Daniel said. The words were quiet. That made them land harder. Caroline set the cold coffee on the counter. How long would it take to test his theory? Marcus looked uncomfortable. If the part is accessible, perhaps 20 minutes. Longer if we need to isolate the harness. Preston answered over him. It would expose us to liability. So will charging me $200,000 for parts that may not be defective. Caroline's voice had changed. It was still controlled, but no longer deferential. Preston studied her for a moment, then looked toward Daniel. 5 minutes, he said. You may observe the startup sequence. You may not remove anything, alter software, or touch the main power system. Daniel nodded once. That is enough. Marcus placed a digital timer on the stainless steel worktable. Several technicians moved closer, not because they believed Daniel, but because they expected to watch him fail. Daniel walked into the bay with a simple multimeter and a small inspection light. He did not open the hood. He did not connect to the diagnostic port. He crouched beside the left rear access panel, watched the indicator sequence, and listened to the 2 clicks again. Then he looked up at Marcus. Stop clearing the fault history, he said. Marcus frowned. Why? Daniel rested 2 fingers against the panel. Because someone has been erasing the only evidence that matters. Marcus did not answer at once. The timer on the stainless steel table continued counting down while the technicians watched Daniel kneel beside the access panel. Preston stood near Caroline with his hands folded, wearing the expression of a man who believed time itself would prove him right. Daniel connected the multimeter to the exposed network line and waited through another startup attempt. The first relay clicked. The green indicator appeared. The second relay followed 0.8 of a second later, and the voltage dropped just enough to disappear beneath the threshold most scanners were designed to record. Daniel watched the numbers settle. Again, he said. Marcus pressed the start command. The same pattern returned. Daniel reached for the inspection light and angled it behind the panel without removing the main harness. A small termination unit sat beneath a retaining clip, nearly hidden by insulation and a braided cable sleeve. One corner showed a pale fracture line. The metal contacts around it carried faint marks from being tightened unevenly. There, Daniel said. Marcus leaned closer. That is not enough to condemn the part. No, Daniel replied. But this is. He touched the probe to the opposite side of the circuit. The resistance reading climbed, paused, then fell outside specification as heat built through the connector. Marcus stared at the meter. One of the younger technicians stopped smiling. Preston glanced toward the timer. You have less than 2 minutes. Daniel looked at the damaged component resting on the towel outside the bay, then back at the unit still installed in the car. They were the same type. That meant the piece on the floor had not fallen from an unrelated machine. Someone had already removed one and replaced it with another. Who serviced this section last? He asked. Preston's answer came too quickly. Routine maintenance is documented internally. That was not my question. Caroline shifted her attention to him. Who serviced it? Preston's jaw tightened. A certified technician. Daniel released the retaining clip and stopped before touching the component. I need permission. Caroline looked at Marcus. Will removing it damage anything? Not if the power is isolated. Preston stepped forward. This has gone far enough. Caroline did not look at him. Isolate the power. Marcus hesitated, then entered the shutdown sequence. The lights on the dashboard faded in order. Daniel waited until the final indicator disappeared, removed the cracked resistor, and placed it beside the piece from the floor. The two components matched, but the installed one carried a different supplier stamp. Marcus picked up a magnifier. His face changed. This is not factory stock. Preston said nothing. Daniel looked toward the parts counter. Do you have an approved replacement? Nora Jenkins had been watching from the warehouse door. She was 56, practical, and had spent 23 years knowing where the dealership kept things everyone else forgot existed. I might, she said. Preston turned toward her. Nora, do not involve yourself. She ignored him and disappeared into the parts room. The timer reached 0. Preston tapped the table once. 5 minutes are over. Daniel began gathering his tools. Caroline looked at the two damaged parts, then at the service estimate beside her cold coffee. No, she said. The 5 minutes proved enough. Nora returned carrying a small sealed package. $14, she said. Daniel examined the part through the plastic, checked the resistance band, and handed it to Marcus. Your call, he said. Marcus looked from Daniel to Caroline, then toward the silent hypercar. For the first time that morning, the lead technician was no longer deciding whether Daniel belonged in the room. He was deciding whether he was willing to admit Daniel had seen what all of them missed. Marcus took the package from Daniel and turned it beneath the service light. The resistance band matched the original specification. The supplier mark did too. He looked toward Preston, then back at the silent car. I want the replacement logged under my authorization, he said. Preston's expression hardened. You are not required to continue this. I know. Marcus carried the part to the left rear access point and set it beside the removed resistor. Daniel remained outside the bay line, exactly where Caroline had asked him to stand. He did not offer instructions until Marcus looked at him. Clean the ground contact before you install it, Daniel said. The uneven torque may have left carbon on the terminal. Marcus examined the connector and found a thin dark film along one edge. He cleaned it, checked the seating pressure, and installed the $14 part. Lily stood beside Caroline now, holding the blue toy car against her chest. Caroline had stopped looking at the estimate. Her attention stayed on Daniel, who watched the dashboard through the glass with the stillness of someone waiting for a familiar sequence to finish. Marcus restored power. The first green indicator appeared. Then the second. Then the third. None of them disappeared. The dashboard woke in a smooth line of light, but the engine remained silent. One technician exhaled through his nose. Preston gave a restrained smile. As expected. Daniel did not move. Wait. 4 seconds passed. The security gateway completed its check. A small authorization icon appeared on Marcus's tablet. Daniel nodded once. Now. Marcus pressed the start command. The relays clicked together this time, not apart. The pumps engaged beneath the rear bodywork. The engine turned once, caught, and settled into a steady idle that filled the service bay with a low, controlled sound. No one spoke. The technicians looked at their tablets. Caroline set both hands on the edge of the counter. Lily's eyes widened, but she stayed quiet because everyone else had. 3 seconds passed before Marcus looked up. The pages of fault codes were clearing in groups. Power distribution errors vanished. Communication failures disappeared. The modules Preston had recommended replacing returned to normal status without being touched. All systems are online, Marcus said. His voice was lower than before. Caroline looked at the leather folder containing the $200,000 estimate, then at the small cracked resistor on the towel. So nothing in that report needs replacement? Marcus checked the readings again. Not based on what we are seeing now. Preston stepped toward the tablet. A temporary restart does not establish long-term reliability. Daniel finally looked at him. Neither does replacing good modules. The engine continued idling without fluctuation. Caroline turned to Daniel. How did you know it would wait 4 seconds? The gateway needed one complete cycle without interruption. And the original part? It was opening as it warned. Just long enough to make every module blame the next one. Marcus studied the old resistor under the magnifier. This did not fracture from age. Daniel said nothing. He had already seen the uneven clamp marks and the wrong supplier stamp. Caroline saw the same conclusion in his face. What caused it? She asked. Daniel looked toward Preston. Preston was not watching the car. He was watching the damaged part in Daniel's hand. That was the answer Daniel had been waiting for. Someone installed the wrong component, he said. And someone already knew what it could do. Caroline did not allow anyone to remove the damaged resistor from the counter. She asked Nora for a clear evidence bag, watched Marcus place the part inside, and wrote the time on the service record herself. Preston stood near the glass wall with his arms at his sides, no longer speaking unless someone addressed him directly. The hypercar continued idling behind them, every system stable, every warning cleared. Pull the last service order, Caroline said. Nora looked toward Preston. All of it? Every technician entry, every parts issue, every revision. Preston stepped forward. Those records are internal. Caroline turned to him. So was the estimate you expected me to sign. Nora left for the archive room. Marcus opened the vehicle history on his tablet and scrolled through the most recent maintenance visit. The car had arrived 6 weeks earlier for a software update, fluid service, and inspection of the rear communication harness. The official report showed no replacement parts in that area. Daniel looked at the old resistor through the evidence bag. Then this should not be here. Marcus enlarged a photograph taken before the service. The original component carried the manufacturer's stamp. A second image, captured after the update, showed the cheaper substitute already installed. The difference was small, but visible. Caroline leaned closer. Who signed the work? Marcus stopped scrolling. The authorization belonged to a technician who had left Crestmont the following week. Preston answered before anyone asked. He was dismissed for performance issues. Daniel looked at the torque marks on the connector. Did he install the part? That is what the record indicates. The record does not list a part. Preston's voice sharpened. You repaired the car. Do not pretend that makes you an auditor. Daniel did not react. He pointed to the supplier code on the damaged resistor. Nora returned carrying a parts ledger and a sealed cardboard box. She placed both on the counter. We received 48 of these 3 months ago, she said. They were entered as temporary substitutes. Marcus opened the box. Inside were identical resistors, each carrying the same unapproved stamp. Caroline looked at Preston. Who approved the purchase? He did not answer. Nora turned the ledger around. A signature appeared at the bottom of the intake page. Preston's. The service bay became quiet again. He recovered quickly. Supply shortages required alternatives. Every dealership made substitutions. Not in a safety-critical communication network, Daniel said. Marcus checked the manufacturer bulletin database. There is no approved substitute for this part. Caroline picked up the estimate folder and opened it to the replacement list. None of the recommended modules had failed. Yet every one carried a markup high enough to transform a $14 mistake into a six-figure repair. How many vehicles received these? She asked. Nora looked at the inventory count. At least 31. Preston gave a small, controlled shake of his head. This is becoming speculation. Daniel studied the fault history Marcus had preserved after the last startup. The same failure pattern appeared under 6 archived customer files stored in the diagnostic system. Each case ended with multiple module replacements. Each invoice exceeded $80,000. He turned the screen toward Caroline. Not speculation. Caroline read the totals slowly. Her expression changed from suspicion to something colder. Were those customers told the original parts were defective? Marcus did not answer. He did not need to. Preston reached for the tablet, but Caroline moved it out of his reach. Do not touch anything, she said. Daniel looked at the row of identical cheap resistors in the open box. The car behind them had been fixed, but the real problem had just become larger than the room. Preston did not wait for Caroline to finish reviewing the archived invoices. By the end of the afternoon, Crestmont's legal office had sent Daniel a formal notice accusing him of unauthorized interference, mishandling proprietary service data, and damaging the dealership's reputation. Daniel read it that evening at the small kitchen table in his apartment while Lily colored beside him. He folded the letter once and placed it under the sugar bowl. The next morning, his primary parts supplier froze his account without explanation. 2 regular customers called to cancel appointments after receiving warnings that Daniel had performed unsafe work on a high-value vehicle. A third asked whether he was being sued. Daniel answered every question the same way. The car was repaired. The records will show the rest. He did not mention Preston. He did not ask for sympathy. At Crestmont, Marcus was called into a private meeting and handed a revised service statement claiming the resistor had been damaged during Daniel's inspection. Marcus read the page twice. That is not what happened. Preston sat across from him with the office blinds closed. It is the version that protects the dealership. It is false. It is controlled. Marcus did not sign. By noon, his access to the diagnostic archive had been restricted. Caroline still had the copied records, but the dealership's ownership group warned her that public accusations without an independent review could expose her company to litigation before the medical partnership launch. She hated the caution because it sounded reasonable. That evening, Daniel returned to his garage and found Lily sitting on a stool beside the workbench, the blue toy car parked neatly between 2 sockets. A man called you a cheap garage mechanic, she said. Daniel set down his tool bag. Did that bother you? He said it like it was bad. Daniel crouched so they were at the same height. Cheap means something costs less. It does not mean it is worth less. Lily looked at the toy car. Then why did he say it? Because some people feel safer when they can make someone else smaller. She thought about that, then pushed the toy car toward him. But you fixed the real one. Daniel nodded. Yes. So tell everyone. He looked toward the locked drawer beneath the workbench, where an encrypted drive still held the report he had written 7 years earlier. Being right is not the same as proving it, he said. The next morning, Caroline arrived at the garage without an assistant. She wore a dark coat and carried a sealed envelope. Daniel did not invite her into the office. He continued replacing a worn pulley on an ordinary pickup while she stood beneath the open bay door. I found 6 more invoices with the same failure pattern, she said. And the same parts substitution. Daniel kept working. That is enough to investigate. Not enough to defeat the story Preston is building about you. She placed the envelope on the bench. Inside was a copy of an old technical report bearing Daniel's name and the signature of the executive who had rejected it. That executive now sat on Crestmont's ownership board. Daniel stopped turning the wrench. Caroline watched the silence settle between them. You warned them 7 years ago, she said. They buried it. Daniel looked at the report he had not seen printed in years. Where did you get this? From the archive they forgot I could access. She slid a second folder beside it. Inside were customer invoices totaling more than $2 million. I cannot clear your name quietly, she said. So I am calling everyone into the same room. The meeting began at 9 the next morning in Crestmont's executive conference room, a long glass space overlooking the service floor where Caroline's hypercar now sat running without a single warning light. Caroline took the seat at the end of the table. Daniel sat 3 places away with the old technical report, the damaged resistor sealed in evidence plastic, and a small test module he had built overnight. Marcus sat across from him. Preston sat beside 2 attorneys and the executive who had rejected Daniel's warning 7 years earlier. No one mentioned Lily, but Daniel had dropped her at school before sunrise and promised he would be there when the final bell rang. That promise mattered more to him than anything in the room. Caroline began without ceremony. She presented the 6 archived invoices, the substituted parts ledger, the photographs taken before and after service, and the customer totals that had exceeded $2 million. Preston interrupted twice. The second time, Caroline raised one hand and continued. You have said Daniel created the failure during his inspection, she said. So we are going to reproduce it without touching a customer vehicle. Daniel placed the test module at the center of the table. It contained 3 linked control units, a gateway, and the same approved termination resistor used in Caroline's car. A monitor displayed all systems communicating normally. Daniel removed the approved part and installed one of the unapproved substitutes from Crestmont's inventory. This is the component your records show was used in at least 31 vehicles, he said. Preston leaned back. A demonstration proves nothing about intent. It proves the diagnosis. Daniel started the module. The first indicator turned green. The second followed. Then the network dropped for less than a second. Fault messages spread across the monitor in rapid succession. Power distribution. Security authorization. Controller communication. Battery management. Every module appeared to be failing. Marcus watched the sequence without blinking. Daniel replaced the substitute with the $14 approved part and restarted the system. All faults disappeared. The room went quiet. The expensive modules were never broken, Caroline said. They were reporting the same interruption. Preston looked toward Marcus. You cannot verify that this mirrors the vehicle. Marcus had been waiting for the question. He opened his own diagnostic copy and placed it beside Daniel's test data. The timing pattern matched exactly. It mirrors the vehicle, he said. And the approved service process should have tested network resistance before recommending module replacement. One of the ownership representatives turned to him. Was that test performed? Marcus looked at Preston. No, Caroline opened Daniel's original report. The executive signature rejecting the recall recommendation appeared at the bottom. The manufacturer knew this failure was possible 7 years ago, she said. Crestmont later purchased unapproved substitutes, installed them, and billed customers for unrelated systems when the predictable failures appeared. Preston's attorney began speaking about incomplete context, but Nora entered with a security archive requested by the ownership group. The footage showed part staff raising concerns about the substitute batch. It also showed Preston approving continued use after the first failure report. No one needed to hear the audio. His signature was visible on every release. Preston looked around the table as though searching for the version of the room he had controlled the day before. It was gone. Daniel reached forward and placed the cracked resistor beside the $2 million invoice summary. The tiny part looked almost meaningless against the polished wood. That was why the silence around it felt so complete. The ownership representative closed Preston's access file and asked security to escort him from the building pending investigation. Preston stood slowly. He looked at Daniel, perhaps expecting satisfaction. Daniel gave him none. He only gathered the test leads and returned them to his case. Marcus remained seated after the door closed. I knew the official diagnosis did not fit, he said. I protected the process instead of the truth. Daniel fastened the case. Then changed the process. Caroline looked through the glass toward the service floor. The car was still running. But the thing Daniel had truly repaired was larger than the machine. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. Crestmont's ownership group reviewed every repair tied to the substitute resistor, refunded customers for unnecessary module replacements, and ordered an independent inspection of all affected vehicles. Preston's employment ended before the review was complete. The manufacturer reopened Daniel's 7-year-old report, this time with his name restored to the first page. Marcus remained at the dealership, but only after asking to address the technicians in the main service bay. Daniel stood near the back with Lily beside him, her blue toy car resting in both hands. Marcus did not make excuses. I trusted an approved process after the evidence stopped supporting it, he said. Daniel saw the cause because he kept asking what the system was actually doing. I saw the same signs and chose the safer answer for my career. He looked directly at Daniel. I was wrong. Daniel gave a small nod. That was enough. Caroline waited until the room cleared before placing a proposal on the service counter. It offered Daniel leadership of a new independent diagnostic review program across every dealership in the ownership group. Large repair estimates involving control modules, battery systems, or network failures would require a second review before customers approved the work. The salary was more than Daniel had earned in any year since leaving Detroit. The title was impressive. The travel schedule was not. I cannot be in 3 states every week, he said. Caroline looked toward Lily, who was tracing the shape of a wheel on the counter with one finger. Because of her. Because that is the life I chose. Caroline closed the folder halfway. Then changed the structure. Daniel looked at her. Keep the garage, she said. Build the review center there. We send the data to you. You travel only when the vehicle cannot. Daniel read the revised terms in silence. He added one condition. Every 6-figure diagnosis had to begin with verification of the smallest possible failure before any major component could be condemned. Caroline agreed without negotiation. 3 months later, a new inspection room operated beside Daniel's original garage. Marcus sent difficult cases there. Nora managed parts verification 2 mornings each week. Daniel still picked Lily up from school at 3:15. He still repaired ordinary pickups, delivery vans, and family sedans because he believed expensive machines were not the only ones worth understanding. On the afternoon the program officially opened, Caroline arrived in the silver hypercar. The engine idled smoothly outside the bay. She stepped out carrying the original $200,000 estimate in one hand and the approved $14 resistor in a clear case in the other. The estimate went into the archive. The resistor went onto a small shelf above Daniel's workbench. No plaque. No speech. It did not need one. Lily climbed into Daniel's old pickup and placed the blue toy car on the dashboard. Caroline stopped beside the open driver's window before leaving. You saved more than my car, she said. Daniel rested one hand on the steering wheel. The car was the easy part. She smiled, not because he had made a joke, but because she finally understood him. Then she returned to the hypercar, started it, and pulled away from the garage without a warning light on the dash. Daniel watched until she reached the road. Lily looked at the small resistor above the workbench. That little thing changed everything, she said. Daniel started the pickup. No, he replied. People noticing it did.